Hello and welcome back to Aetheral Space 3.50 with a big 50th anniversary of Aetheral Space.
Do you guys have any idea? This might be very well the longest arc in web serial history, unironically.
Wow.
Have you ever thought about that, Tan? Because usually people spread out their web serial arcs more.
Yeah, but I don't go by the grain. It was with it was all one thing. There'd be no point in splitting it up. It would have been the same result in the end.
Would it have?
It would, yeah.
I feel like this could have been 2 arcs. You could have done the setup arc and then the putting down the dominoes arc.
That's not how we do things here on Aetheral Space.
Well, do you remember what happened last time? Because I think everyone died and everything's relatively resolved.
Not everyone. Fucking Jail died. Roof got him. But Skipper didn't die. Dragon didn't die.
Fifth Dead died, I mean.
Oh.
Like, all the villains of the arc died.
Yeah.
Alright. Well, actually, no, that's not true. There's one villain left. The guy that tried to kill Marie. I wonder what he's doing. Okay, anyway. Yes, reading. Sorry, I'm putting it off because I have a headache. I thought the ibuprofen would help. It did not. Noelle rubbed her hands over her face, trying to ignore the urge to just keep her eyes closed and go to sleep. The street she'd finally sat down in wasn't really anything in terms of comfort. The benches had been made deliberately uncomfortable to discourage the homeless from sleeping there, but after the week she'd had, she was pretty sure a bed of nails would seem fairly appealing. Still, she wasn't in such friendly company that she could just doze off. Not one, but 2 special officers, and the one who probably would have been on her side, Rayonch, was firmly unconscious, sprawled out on the bench beside her. Marie Hazard and Atoy Muzazi were standing a short distance away on the street corner, talking quietly. "I can't believe I only caught up to you after everything was over," Marie sighed, waving a vague hand towards the inferno on the skyline. "And after you went and had so much fun, too." I hope that was Marie's voice. I don't remember it at all.
Yeah, pretty much.
Muzazi raised an eyebrow. "I'm not sure I would describe that debacle as fun. It was actually quite horrifying and terrible." "You've got me there," Marie chuckled, as if the whole thing was really just one big joke. "By the by, I can't help but notice you don't have Dragon Hadrian with you. I was under the impression that getting him was the whole point of this vacation." The swordsman's face darkened, and he looked down towards the ground. "I don't want to talk about it," he said, voice low. He didn't want to talk about it. Well, Noelle had been quiet for quite long enough. Dragon Hadrian... Oh, is this Noelle talking, right?
Yeah.
"Dragon Hadrian walked away when he wasn't looking," she snapped, voice dripping with bitter humor. Atoy Muzazi cast an annoyed glance back at her. Clearly, he'd only just remembered she was there, which probably explained how he'd let Dragon Hadrian get away, too. Marie simply put an amused hand to her mouth, suppressing a giggle. "Oh," she said, clearly amused. "Is that really what happened, Atoy?" With a click of his tongue, Muzazi turned his head away. "That's something of an oversimplification." Marie wasn't going to let him off that easily. She circled around him, leaning forward with her arms clasped behind her back. The smug, classic anime girl pose. The smuggest smile on Talden was aimed full blast at Atoy Muzazi. "Oh," she said, "an oversimplification? So she's not totally wrong?" The crossing of Muzazi's arms. When the Muzazi crosses his arms. The crossing of Muzazi's arms grew tighter. "She's not totally wrong," he muttered. For a second, it looked like Marie would embark on an absolute voyage of mockery against your fellow special officer. Noelle could clearly see it. Countless minutes of teasing and dreaded banter with her as a captive audience. She was half tempted just to climb back into the Dawn House, if that was the future before her. Luckily, however, Marie seemed to have mercy, breaking away from Muzazi and taking a step towards Noelle instead. "I warned you, didn't I?" she said brightly, "that you weren't cut out for this type of thing. Look how things ended up." Noelle hurriedly wiped away any remaining leakage from her eyes. "Nobody asked you," she snapped. "Besides, if I hadn't been there, who knows how things could have turned out, I assume. Turned up. Turn up for what? The whole idea still seemed absurd to her. The whole idea still seemed absurd to her. A planet was just way too big for one person to have that much impact, wasn't it? Even a city seemed too huge for one person to decide its fate. And yet, if Hadrian had told the truth, that was exactly what Noelle had done. She'd stopped the whole thing from going up. True, true, Marie said, an inquisitive finger on her chin. If you hadn't made your little contribution, we could have had a really depressing ending here. I'm sure I could have escaped it. Ha! Do you think she would survive the planet blowing up?
No.
Marie? She'd just reform.
Built different.
But you and Musashi would have been a different story, and I would have been sad about that for a while. Noelle didn't even have the energy to put contempt on her face. Your concern is touching, she said. Thank you kindly, said Marie before snapping her fingers in Musashi's direction. Hey, a toy! Do you have that thing I asked you about? Musashi broke away from brooding mode and handed Marie a tiny black disc, small enough to fit between two of his fingers. Marie accepted it and then extended it down towards Noelle. What's this? Noelle said, accepting the delivery. Instructions on how to join up with the Special Officers Commission, Marie replied, giving Noelle an unwelcome pat on the head. Where to join up, what you'll need, what'll be required of you. The Supremacy's always looking for capable people, so we're meant to hand these out when we see potential. I don't usually get the chance, so I'm pretty excited. Noelle raised an eyebrow. I thought I wasn't cut out for this type of thing. That was then, this is now. You said it minutes ago, though. So, Marie replied, like I said, that was then, this is now. My appraisal changes by the second, sweetie. It sounds like you're just arbitrary to me. Of course I am, Marie smiled sweetly. When you're as strong as me, you can be whatever you want. Speaking of which, Musashi cut in, I believe that what we should be right now is leaving. I have no desire to spend any more time on this uncivilized planet, or in UAP space for that matter. Marie seemed surprised. Really? She said, taking a step back to lean against the wall. You don't want to keep going after Hadrian? I'm sure he's still somewhere around here. The toy Musashi looked pensively down at the sword sheathed at his hip. He was silent for a moment before answering. I need time to think about what I need to do next, but not here. Not so close to the source of my fury. I'm surprised you can be so clear-headed about it. Believe me, Musashi's voice was flat, with barely restrained anger. It is taking considerable effort. Marie patted him on the back, which seemed just as unwelcome as the pat to the head before swinging around to shrug at Noelle. And there you have it, I guess. A toy's homesick, so we're going home. Check out the date on that disc if you're interested. Or don't if you're not. I'm honestly not that invested. Noelle sighed. Thanks for being so honest, I guess. Savor it, waved Marie. She'd already turned and started walking away. It's a once-in-a-decade thing. You're so lucky! Musashi followed after her, having returned to his moody silence, and after a few moments they'd vanished into the darkness. Noelle sighed, stuffing the disc into her pocket and dragging Rayon out from the bench. It was difficult to move him. He was damn heavy, but eventually she managed to maneuver herself into a configuration where she could lodge herself under his arm and move him along. Sorry, weird question, but it came to my mind with the whole disc thing. How much more powerful is an Aether user to an average person? Is it to the point where there are probably no special officers that can't use Aether, like every special officer is an Aether user?
It would be very rare to find a special officer without Aether, but it is possible.
Theoretically, if you trained your body to the limits and had the appropriate weapons. Okay.
Yeah, it would be more of a technology advantage than a physical one.
Oh, fair. What's his face? Oh, he had Aether, though. John this guy. There was no shortage of shady doctors on Talon. All she really needed was to get him a place to recuperate for a little while. Then she could decide what to do. She walked through a nearby alleyway, carrying Rayon along as she thought things through. Strangely enough, the near darkness of the alley lended itself better for introspection than the street had. Less visual data to distract her, she supposed. Becoming a special officer of the Supremacy? It was an interesting idea, if nothing else. She had nothing in terms of loyalty to the UAP, so that wasn't a concern, and the prestige and rank that would surely come with the position weren't bad either. If she could manage it, she'd be set for life. But could she see herself as a special officer? Was the position itself appealing, not just the perks? Why don't you just be a special officer, and then you'll have your 3 years of experience whenever you want to apply anywhere else, dum-dum? It was easy to see now that she'd simply swapped her father for the citizen. Would she now be swapping the citizen for that totalitarian government? It was a hell of a thing to think about. Noelle let yet another sigh escape her throat. At least she could complain to the unconscious Rayon, if nobody else. She opened her mouth to speak. Why can't these things just be... Why can't these things just be simple, you ask? Asked an unfamiliar voice. Noelle whirled around to face the darkness at the alley's entrance, letting Rayon fall to the floor. Her mind ran at lightning speed, analyzing the voice that had interrupted her. Elderly, in their 80s or older, and male. the kind of completely benevolent voice you'd imagine coming from a kindly grandparent. "Who's there?" she said, voice cautious, letting her cyan aether spark around herself to show she was ready to fight. I hope this isn't an existing character. I'm just going to keep going with the voice I was doing. "Oh dear," the voice said from the shadows, sounding completely genuine.
That's not very benevolent.
"Oh dear." Like that?
Yeah.
"Oh dear," the voice said from the shadows, sounding completely genuine. "Please forgive me. It wasn't my intention at all to startle you. I'm so very sorry." Noelle narrowed her eyes. "Answer the question!" Of course, yes, the voice replied. "It's only natural when meeting a new person to exchange introductions, isn't it? And as the one approaching you, it's my job to introduce myself first, isn't it? That's only natural, isn't it?" I hate the way this guy talks. He's like the fucking hyena. "That's the way these sorts of matters are supposed to go, no matter which way you look at it. Very well, here we go. Just fucking introduce yourself." It emerged from the darkness, as if the shadows at the end of the alley were just a vertical pool. The balding, pale head of an elderly man, wrinkles compressing his face so much that he seemed to be perpetually squinting. He smiled gently. "My name is Smith." "And what do you want from me?" Noelle did her best to keep her voice firm. She had no drones left, and she wasn't sure how much her aether could really defend against physically. "Want from you? Oh, no. The man called Smith shook his head. "My desire in this case is to enhance, not extract. You are a bright young star who shines wonderfully, even now. That is something Darkstar." That is not. Tan, your new villain's name is not Darkstar.
No, that's not a person's name.
Okay, Darkstar can't help but notice. As Smith's head moved, Noelle got an idea of the body that head was attached to. A huge, lumpy thing. For a moment, Noelle thought he had a hunchback, but the body configuration wasn't right for that. It was more like a pillar of misshapen flesh with a thin black cloth draped over it, with the head sticking out from the middle of the torso. "Answer the question," Noelle demanded. "What is it you want?" Smith sighed. "People these days have lost their great love of conversation. It saddens me sometimes, it really does. But you're absolutely right, of course. In a situation like this, one should make their intentions clear, shouldn't they? As quickly as possible." Oh my god, this guy does not get to a point. Is this why this is 13 pages long? "As quickly..." Failed in that regard, sadly. Allow me to correct that. I couldn't help but overhear those special officers offering you stagnation in their ranks. "What of it?" Smith widened his gaze just slightly, staring at Noelle with jet-black eyes like those of a shark. "Would you be interested," he said, "in seeing what a true revolution looks like?" That did not go well for her with the citizen, Noelle. Noelle, you should say no. Alright, I'm gonna pass it to you. My head's frickin' killing me.
Sure thing. Alden Petrio read through bright-eyed Talden through one eye, while tracking the message he was writing with the other. He was sat in a rented room on the Talden light point, his scripts spread out on the desk before him. Outside the windows, the obsidian blanket of space could be seen, with just the occasional pinprick of light to remind one that the stars existed. This was concerning. A disaster that was supposed to have happened had not happened. He'd based himself on the Talden system's light point, ready to plan his next move once the precise nature of the calamity had become clear, but now he was finding that the news was being very insistent on contradicting that. The death of a president and the crash of the Dawn House were distressing to the public, to be sure, but nothing on the level of what he'd been told to prepare for. Something had definitely gone wrong, and his clients hadn't been in contact. More likely than not, he'd been cut loose then. Concerning. If that was the case, did that mean the authorities were aware of his involvement? Would they be coming for him now? If so, the best thing to do would be to make himself scarce.
But I believe you mean if saws.
I didn't say that. Are you insane? Book passage on a ship going far away from here, and do his utmost to forget that anything had transpired. He pressed his fingers together. He'd set things up, of course, so that his operation could be dismantled with but a few phone calls. Those employees who could be trusted to keep quiet would be given generous retirement funds, and those who couldn't would be retired permanently. It wasn't the sort of decision he could go back on. He needed time to consider it. A few seconds passed. He considered it. Yes, it was the best course of action. If he was overacting, there was nothing stopping him from setting up a new operation anywhere else. Somewhere else, even. He had good relations with the Supremacy, and there was no shortage of places just as corrupt as Talden within their borders. He could adjust quite nicely. There was no time to waste. Alden stood up from his desk, scooped up his scripts, and carefully deposited them into the pockets of his coat. He needed to find a reliable pilot to get him away from Talden. That would take a great deal of money in itself. And before he did that, he had to work out exactly where he wanted it to go. He'd likely reached that conclusion during the conversation, but it was still another matter on his personal to-do list. He walked to the door, half his mind already dedicated to the task of calculating likely cost of transport, opened it, and came face to face with Marie Hazard. She smiled at him.
No! Oh no! No, no, no!
Oh god, oh fuck!
No.
Alden didn't even have time to open his mouth before she swung her hand forward and, with a burst of pain like nothing he had ever experienced, plunged it into his abdomen. He tried to cry out in pain, but the only things that escaped his throat were a strangled wheeze and the bitter taste of metal. "You shouldn't have double-crossed me, Petrio," Marie said sweetly, her hand still inside him. "I knew I should be used to it, but I really do take these sorts of things personally. I won't be able to sleep at night if I didn't teach you a lesson." Marie didn't move, but Petrio felt the pain in his stomach intensify, spreading to cover more and more of his body. As he looked down, he saw why. Inside him, inside his guts, the fingers of Marie Hazard were growing. He could see the impressions of them bulging out of his skin, growing longer and stretching out like the branches of a tree, and splitting in places, one finger becoming two, becoming three as they wound their way throughout his body, puncturing whatever crossed their path. Like a net spreading through him, they squeezed on his insides, popping them like balloons of sheer inhuman strength. This wasn't Aether. He'd seen Aether, and he knew it couldn't do this with us. He looked
I
up
knew it!
at the crimson eyes of the woman who was doing this to him. A deep ancestral terror welled up inside him, and with the last effort of his life, words came to his lips. "Jean, tyrant." Marie's smile spread just the slightest.
Wasn't this
bit.
one of my theories, or am I misremembering?
You did. This was one of your many theories.
Yes!
So nice to be recognised. She pulled her hand out of him, her fingers ripping strips of his flesh and skin free as they spooled out the wound like spaghetti. A grotesque splash of blood coated the floor, and as Marie pushed him backwards, Alden slipped on it, falling to the ground, staring up at his killer in muted horror. Marie's smile spread just the slightest, but...
Well, the main public thinks all the Gene Tyrants are dead, right?
That is... Everyone thinks that, yeah.
There weren't that many. They weren't like a race of people, right? They were like a small
They were.
group. Oh, they were a race.
Yeah, but they were also the ones in charge.
Okay, so she's like a survivor of that race. That makes it much more reasonable why people didn't recognize her. I was under the impression it was like the council where there were like 13 of them and they were just that good.
Maria's smile spread just the slightest bit more, canines glinting in the light. In the minutes that followed, Alden Petro would come to learn that what he had to fear was not the authorities, not the wrath of his clients, not the loss of his business. No. What he had to fear was teeth.
Alright, here's my question then. Hold on, before we keep going here. I've seen the kind of damage Marie has sustained and been fine. How did they die?
There is an explanation for this. It wasn't easy.
Okay, and are they immortal, or are they like, they live like lifespans out?
They are immortal unless killed.
Okay. Based? I can't believe Musashi has a Gene Tyrant waifu. Things are coming up, Musashi.
Shall I popcorn this next bit back to you?
Sure. All things I love this change. All things considered, Rick Silva was having a pretty good day. The clouds outside the Reverie were a lovely shade of red that evening, and the heat of the sun overhead was being filtered by the resort's shields to a comfortable level. The crashing of the waves, the tweeting of the imported birds. He'd been here for a month now, and the level of detail the designers had gone into still amazed him. Worth every credit. He was lounging on a sunbed right on the edge of the Reverie's artificial beach, the tide coming in and out at regular intervals. Unlike the messy unpredictability of a real ocean, the Reverie's water feature could be relied on to behave appropriately at all times. A bottle of wine lay unopened on the table beside Silva. It was Adriston mint, imported directly from the ice ball itself. Right now it was colorless and unappealing, but that would change in a few seconds' time. Silva... What the fuck?
I noticed. I checked. I don't know how to
Cuddle cooked? I thought it said cucked. Silva checked the altitude on his wristbound script, noting with satisfaction that they were about to ascend just enough to make his purchase with it. The Reverie was a fairly new experimental resort, created to suit the demands of top-class clientele. An artificial landscape atop a disc-shaped vessel moving through the gorgeous clouds of the gas giant of Ulos, like a colossal petri dish flying through the sky. They passed the altitude mark, and immediately the wine in the bottle vegan bubbling. shifting from its original colorless appearance to a vivid shade of crimson. On its native address, you'd have to climb snowy mountains to achieve that shade of red. Here in the Reverie, though, it was just a matter of sitting and waiting. Oh, so it's like, when you're high up enough, it turns fancy.
Yeah.
Silva poured himself a glass and took a sip. Delicious! Like the first gasp of breath after swimming underwater. Excuse me, sir? He wasn't alone. Silva looked up. A young woman had approached his sun chair, smiling sheepishly. She was wearing a swimsuit, and long blonde hair billowed around her like a curtain. Silva gave her an appreciative look over from behind his sunglasses before replying. Yeah? You're Rick Silva, right? She said, shuffling as she kept smiling. From Verger Reconstruction? That was what this was about. That I am, Rick grinned, lifting up his glass. What can I do you for? I'm actually, the woman began, before taking a deep breath and trying again. I'm from Ursula Minor, where the bombings were. Your company helped rebuild after the war ended. I just wanted to thank you. Rick took a sip of his wine. No problem at all. It's not something you have to thank me for, though. Peace is a responsibility. Something you have to work for. The woman cocked her head. What do you mean? Well, Rick put his glass down for a moment. It's easy enough for some politician to say, "Oh, the war is over. We have peace now." All you need for something like that is a mouth and an ego, you know? Actually making that fact, rebuilding what's been lost, repairing the damage done, that takes substance. It's the difference between lip service and being in it for the long haul. The woman blinked, clearly surprised at the length of his reply. Yeah, of course, she said, clearly not having understood. I'm surprised you're so young, though, to be honest. Young? Rick raised an eyebrow. Well, I have good doctors. He nodded to his hand, still curled around the wine glass. The finest surgery money could buy had ensured Rick Silva had the face and features of a 20-year-old, but his hands were still as wrinkled and thin as his 80 years would... Jesus! Why wouldn't you fix the hands? What?
It's harder, you got more nerves there.
Not compared to your feet!
Face.
What?
You mean?
Oh, did he not get his feet fixed? I assumed the hands were the only thing that was still old.
No, well, you can't see his feet right now.
Okay, well, did this prolong his life, or is this just vanity?
This is vanity.
Okay. The finest surgery money could buy had... Sorry. The woman tried to suppress it, but her brow clearly wrinkled in disgust at the discrepancy. She left soon after. The gratitude of the shallow only lasted long enough for a few thankful words and a photograph. And as the reverie switched over into its nighttime settings, Rick got to his feet and began walking back to his cabin. An artificial, holographic moon floated high in the sky, casting false light upon the ground as Rick strolled up to his cabin, twirling his keys around his fingers. It took him a couple of tries to get the key into the lock. He'd been drinking for a while, after all, but eventually he managed to get the thing in there and give it a satisfying twist. His business investments over the last couple of weeks, handy...
Oh, hardly. I don't know what happened there.
Hadn't quite
sense.
borne fruit, but still, life could be worse. Silva opened the door. Yo, said Skipper, sprawled out in the armchair in the corner of the cabin. He pointed a lazy finger towards Silva. Silva froze, eyes wide as they stared at the pointing digit. For a moment he considered just slamming the door shut and running for it, but he doubted that this intruder would allow that. Frozen at the door, his mouth dry, Silva spoke. What is it I can do for you, sir? Skipper grinned. Don't act like you don't know who I am. Why would I know who you are? What is it you want? Money? Skipper sighed, rubbing his forehead with his free metal hand. You're looking at my finger like I'm pointing a loaded gun at you, pal. You'd have already run for it if you didn't know what I was capable of. Let's stop playing these games, yeah, sponsor of war? Silva glared at Skipper, and the look of it on his eyes was itself confirmation. How did you find me? Took some digging through what was left of the Dawn House, but I'm a resourceful guy. Managed to pull your communication signature from the hologram systems, and once I passed that over to a pretty mercenary Paradisus.
Yeah.
Paradisus? Paradisus. They were able to point me in your direction. Come in and close the door, or I'll shoot. Slowly, careful not to startle the Aether user, Silva entered the cabin and closed the door behind him. You've gone to a lot of trouble, then, he said, judging the distance between himself and the vanity. On the underside of it, he knew, was a hidden button that would alert the security automatics, and they could be there in seconds. I told you I'd kill you. That's not Skipper. I told you
Yes.
I'd kill you, Skipper said, still grinning like the visage of a skull. Do you remember that? Silva smiled calmly, putting the bag containing his wine down beside him. I do, but I don't think he'll do that. You don't? Ah. No, Silva shook his head. I don't. It's like you said, Skipper. You're a resourceful man. You're not the sort to waste an opportunity for momentary satisfaction. Skipper just kept on staring, relaxed but unblinking. You're making some assumptions about me there, pal. Are they wrong? You've got me impressed here, though, Skipper said, suddenly leaning back in the chair. Rick Silva, huh? It's a pretty cushy operation you've got going. You start wars with one hand, clean up after them with the other, and you reap the rewards from both. It's impressive. Awful, sure, but impressive. Silva couldn't allow Skipper to control the pace of the conversation. He took a subtle step forward as he spoke, bringing himself closer to the vanity. You must understand that my resources can be useful to you, don't you? I can see you're a man of ideals. That's a splendid thing, but you need material resources to make those ideals a reality. You realize that, don't you? Sure. It's like on Talden, you see, Silva went on, doing his best to keep his voice level. That Zhao, he's in charge now, and he wants to clean the planet up. You know the first thing he did? Enact a purge of all the people who'd stand against that. That's brutal, yes, brutal, but necessary to make his dream come true. Skipper's free hand... Wait, what? Is Zhao committing genocide? What?
It's not genocide.
Hands? He's purging people.
There's a political purge. So it's still pretty bad.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say. It's like he jumped to genocide real fast. Skipper's free hand drummed against the arm of his chair. You're going somewhere with this, or... Silva leaned forward. Weapons, ships, automatics. Name it and I can give it to you. I can make sure your dreams come true. Skipper's smile turned icier, a firmness settling in his gaze. Silva's heart began beating faster, as if realizing it didn't have many beats left. You think I need your help? Skipper said quietly. I love it. A piece of shit like you. Let me tell you, my bovine buddy, Skipper sighed. I want to change the shape of this world. That's my dream. I assume he means like the galaxy or whatever when he says world. Like the... Okay. When I'm done, and that's a when, not an if, yeah? There won't be room for people like you at the top anymore. If I make that dream come true with your help, I won't be changing the shape of this world, will I? I'll just be throwing a fresh coat of paint over it. Not really what I'm looking for. Sorry. Silva took the last step he dared to, as close to the vanity as he could get without arousing suspicion. I advise you reconsider, he beseeched Skipper. You'll regret it otherwise. Eventually, I can promise you that right now. The captain sighed, and a spark of green aether ran up his arm. Wait, Skipper's a captain?
Yeah, he's got a ship.
Oh,
That's
I'll
what
regret
Skipper
it
means.
eventually. Probably, yeah. But right now I think I can handle this with a pretty clear conscience. For a moment, there was silence, save for the steady clicking of the antique clock in the corner. Skipper stared into Silva's eyes. Silva stared into Skipper's. Birds tweeted outside. Moving with all the speed his old bones could manage, Rick Silva lunged for the vanity. Heartbeat shotgun. Pow! Popcorn.
You're sure nobody's coming after us? Dragon called out from the ship's lounge. It was the third time that hour. I'm sure, Skipper replied, leaning over the steering console. I'm a thorough guy. They won't find out what happened for a couple of days. Guaranteed. That's actually kind of terrifying, Dragon said, still shouting. But, okay, I guess?
I love the way these characters talk.
They're on their way out of the Ulo system. After their brief stop at the Reverie, it's probably a good idea to get out of there as soon as possible. They got the ship back, good as new. Bruno and Serena turned in for a sleep while Dragon was doing whatever it is Dragon did in the lounge. Skipper was watching the stars from the cockpit, Ruth in the passenger seat next to him. She was staring off with a strange look on her face. Skipper turned to her. You okay? Just thinking, she muttered. About anything in particular? She turned to look at him, but in her eyes you could see that she was still deep in thought. You said that Chell was working with an illusionist, right? An Aether user? He'd figured this uncomfortable conversation would be coming around before too long. Yep, he had a guy helping him maintain his cover, stopped me from hitting him when he first revealed himself. Finally, Ruth properly looked at him.
You're at an Lucius for hire using Aether. Doesn't that sound like?
Someone we know? Skip aside. North. Suddenly an accusatory gleam was in Ruth's gaze. I saw him die. I saw what was left of him. All Skipper could offer was a weak shrug. I don't know what to tell you, Ruth. When a guy can make you see whatever he wants, that doesn't mean much. Did you know? Ruth growled, her fist tightened in her lap. As quickly as he could, Skipper shook his head. No, he said truthfully. I thought he was dead, same as you. I'm just not surprised that I might have been wrong, yeah? Sounds very possible to me. Yeah, her anger abated. Ruth turned her gaze away, back out of the cockpit. I can believe it too. Suddenly her expression seemed to freeze in a moment of alarm. Eyes wide, lips tight, pushing herself back in her seat as if flinching away from something. Skipper, she said, voice cautious. I get it's a lot to take in, Ruth, yeah, Skipper said, rubbing his metal hand over his face to indulge the exhaustion. But there's not much we could do about it right now, so... Skipper! He moved his hand away, followed her gaze out the window, and in that moment he imagined that his face was a good match for hers. It certainly was a sight to behold. A colossal starship, bigger than most of the skyscrapers of Talden, had appeared just in front of them. It was bone white in coloration, with black pinpricks of portholes and viewing cameras dotting its surface. The shape of the thing was strange, starting off as a straight rod before curving upwards into some kind of saucer. Skipper couldn't help but think of a giant spoon looking at it. He wasn't sure whether the absurdity of that made things more or less anxiety-inducing. The communicator on the console of them burst into life. Starship Substream, a firm, stern voice intoned from the other end, using the new name Skipper had given the yacht. This is Unite Regent of the Unified Alliance of Planets Unite Fleet. You are hereby ordered to surrender both yourself and your vessel immediately. Failure to comply in a timely manner will result in hostilities. You have 5 minutes to acquiesce to this demand. Any attempt at vacating your present position will be taken as a failure to comply. And with that celebrity spiel, spoken with all the enthusiasm of a salesman reading a script, the crackling of the communicator died away again. Well, gulped Skipper, I've always thought not being in trouble is kind of boring, honestly. Ruth's glare could have melted through the hull.
Remember when Skipper had like a thing he wanted to do with Dragon and then they just kept getting caught?
You're sure nobody's coming after us? Dragon called out. The full time hour. End of arc 3.
Hey, alright boys, get ready for another 50 chapter arc of shenanigans.
Oh, Skipper.
Classic Skipper. So how are they going to get out of this one, huh?
Well,
also, why is a Gene Tyrant working for the Supremacy?
Who can say? Yeah, we learned that there's a lot of stuff that happens, chapter.
I wonder how old Marie is. If they're immortal, age-wise. Do you think she's from the old days, or do you think she's like from a family that managed to survive this long in hiding?
Who can say?
Can say. Here's my question: what do you guys think? Fucking the big ship. What do you think they are gonna do with Skipper and them? What do you think's their deal?
Who knows? They've never done anything wrong, so I can't imagine why anyone would come after them.
I mean, they saved the planet.
Yeah, but who is there to see it?
Wait. For all it looked like to them, to the outsiders, as he crashed a giant ship into it. Oh no! No! This is so sad. Alright, well, that was Arc 3. Can you guys believe it's over? I can't. We've been reading this for over half a year. Over a
third of my
life.
But I
can't believe how
I really enjoyed this. Should we do a little retrospective on this arc?
How? What do you want us to do? Do you mean like a separate video? Do you mean now? What do we do?
I was like, did you like it?
Did I like it? Look, I see this arc the way that I think I see the boat arc in Berserk. While I was reading it, I was like, is it ever going to end? But now that it's complete, like as someone who can read it all the way through now, I think it's paced fine and it's good. But, like, reading it as it came out, I was like, oh my god, it's never ending. But, after the fact, it's good and fine. And otherwise, I mean, you know, the writing, the plot was all fun. I enjoyed it. My only thing I could have wanted more of is I really wish there had been more rapport or more development when Musashi and Dragon were together. But everything else I thought was spot on. Great job as always. Characters were great. Action scenes were written well. Setting was interesting. You set up a plot. You caught me by surprise. I had a good time.
Nice.
And now it's finally over. Is Arc 4 going to be this long?
No. Maybe. No, it won't be.
50 fucking chapters. You know how insane that is? You could literally, if you just took like a couple pages or like a chapter to intro Dragon in the setting, you could literally just take Arc 3 and that would be its own book. Its own self-contained plot. That's how long this is. Did you think about that? Think about that. So your average, let's say each chapter was 6 pages, which they're not. That's the minimum. 50 chapters, 10. That's 300 pages.
Damn, that's crazy.
You have plenty of chapters that are not only 6.
Yeah,
you realize how it's so big.
Well, thank you for listening and reading and watching, everyone.
Wait, hold on.
What?
No, what the fuck is your retrospective on the arc now that it's done being
well, I enjoyed writing it. This is one I had in mind for quite a while, this arc. So I wanted to, this was always intended to be bigger than the first two by quite a bit, because I wanted to, a big in-depth one.
Mm-hmm.
Because, the other two were very... they were very limited in terms of characters, I think. I wanted to have a lot of characters.
What was the easiest and hardest parts of the arc to write for you, and what was the most fun and the least fun parts of the arc?
So what was the first question again?
What were the easiest and hardest parts to write, like the way you wanted it to come out?
Easiest parts were probably the fight scenes, because I really enjoy writing those, because it's once they have the unique powers and stuff, it's fun to think of. It's fun of ways. My favourite part probably writing was Ruth versus the Fifth Ed, where she's doing all the crazy tricks with her armour. Putting it on other people and using them as a weapon. Probably the hardest.
The hardest, I meant, sorry.
Hardest, I would probably... I don't know if it was particularly hard, really. But,
there was nothing that made you have to stop and reword it or think about how you wanted to put it out?
Not really.
Right, fair enough. And I assume, based on your description, the fights were your favorite part to write.
Yeah, the fights are meaningless unless I built up some of well.
Right. What was your least favorite part of the story to write then for that?
Sometime in the middle there, between the hospital, between the 9 and the hospital, that was a bit of a meander there that I wanted to. Because I wanted time to pass, but I didn't. I had to think of ways to fill that time, and that's why Ruth was sad for such a long time.
Aww. And now that you've been writing Aetheral Space for almost a year, because you started in June or July, and it's May, so you're nearly at a year here on your anniversary. Are you happy you started Aetheral Space? Do you think you're going to see it all the way through?
Hopefully, yeah. I do. I have every intention to.
Awesome. I still think you should start sending this to publishers. Ironically, get an agent, have them look it over, see the viability of it. I mean, they'll probably tell you a couple.
I don't think I'll much luck with that with web serials. If anything, if I did do any sort of publishing, it would have to be self-publishing, I think. Because
thought about
with traditional publishers, I would love to start a Patreon because I love money, but I don't think
you could do something like have patrons get a chapter a week early, get their chapters a week early or something.
Yeah, that's the standard sort of practice there. Something for the future. If anyone is interested in that sort of thing, leave a comment maybe, or just somehow get to me and give me a thumbs up emoji on Discord.
Now here's my last question for you. Let's say they all have to be different, whether it's an object or a piece of clothing. All right. Name the top 3 pieces of Aetheral Space merchandise you'd most like to create /see.
Dragon plushie.
All right.
Skipper coat. Skipper coat and cape, actually.
Oh, Skipper coat and cape would be that. Every cosplayer would do that. That's so good. All right. And what's the last one? Just an actual sword. It's $1,000. It's imported from Japan.
Like when a cheesy lightsaber, you press a button and it glows.
Like the fucking old He-Man swords.
Exactly.
I like that. I would buy that. I would buy all the merch. Alright, well, it's been a ball. Thank you, Tan, or should I say Author Sensei. And thank you to all you readers that have stuck around this whole time. If you really want to celebrate Arc 3, you should leave a review on Royal Road. But, no one's gonna make you.
I would appreciate it. I'm going to be so happy. I'll put you in Aetheral space. But you wouldn't be named.
He won't do that. He won't do that. Unless your name's Comedy Man Kelp. You're actually a character.
Yeah. Bye!
Actually, oh, that's a good... Wait, oh, fuck, okay. Wait, can I keep interviewing you?
How long?
Alright,
40 minutes.
we'll move on. And my last question is, what Aetheral space character do you identify with most, and which one do you think I'm the most like?
I identify Richard Gardner the most because we're both assholes.
You're not an asshole, you're a good guy.
I think you're quite like Ruth.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting. This is so sad! No! It's true. Alright. Well, thank you very much, Tan. It's been a pleasure to read this, and I hope to see you guys in the next arc. Bye.
Bye!